I am a 30 years old male, and I got married 2 weeks ago. I was married before, but it ended after I found out that my older brother Thomas, 34 years old, got involved with my first wife. It was devastating because we were close and had a great relationship. I also helped him so much while he was struggling, and seeing how he repaid me hurts to this very day. I stopped talking to him, and Mom and Dad forced me to keep it a secret, and because I was too weak to argue with them, I just kept my own distance. Then I met my now wife. My family loved and embraced her as their own. Mom and Dad treat her like a queen, which helped repair and solidified my relationship with them. However, as the wedding was approaching, they told me they expected me to invite Thomas. I of course refused, but they kept guilting me about what the relatives and other guests would think and say when they don't see Thomas there. I fought with them about it till the day of the wedding. Turned out they'd invited him behind my back, but I found out and stopped them in time. They came to the wedding looking pissed, asking what we were going to tell people when they ask about Thomas. I told them I'd take care of it. And what I did was take a moment while everyone was paying attention, grabbed the mic and flat out announced this and said, "The reason I didn't invite Thomas to my wedding is because I was worried he'd steal my now wife just like he stole the first one." I said it playfully to not make it sound so tense, but most of the guests looked shocked and started mumbling. Then it went awkwardly quiet for a moment. Then we moved on, but I saw Mom and Dad walk out while looking at me grudgingly. Later they started lashing out about how I just exposed Thomas and caused him to be shunned by the family in the most hideous of ways. I told them that I already said I didn't want him there, yet they tried to push him on me repeatedly, saying, "What are people going to say?" So I told them the reason why he wasn't there in a playful way, but they, the guests, still got the message. Mom started yelling about how everyone will now look down on and shun Thomas. She called me pathetic and cruel for still punishing him and gradually ruining his life despite him apologizing and trying to reconcile. But in my opinion, some things are just unforgivable. We've been on horrible terms since then. My wife said at least now they're off my back about what people would say about not inviting him. I am a 28-year-old woman and have been married to my husband, a 32-year-old man, since 2018. My husband is ethnically Japanese and a second-generation American. His parents are from Osaka. He kind of sort of half speaks Japanese, mostly sentences he has memorized / greetings. And his parents speak great English. On the other hand, I lived in Japan for 3 years, so I am conversationally pretty good. I have studied hard to get to the level I'm at, and I have passed level 2 of the Japanese language proficiency test. Not great, but not bad. Lately, my husband is super into me calling him Goshijin-sama, which can be translated to my honored husband. It's extremely unusual to call your own husband this, as it is usually reserved for other people's husbands as a respectful term. But it's kind of an anime / Japanese geek culture thing. I was okay with it in private because it makes him happy. Last week went to his parents' house for dinner, and on the way over he asked if I could call him Goshijin-sama all evening. I immediately shot his idea down with a firm no, because that would be super embarrassing. His parents are native Japanese speakers in their 60s. I'm not going to subject them to what you'd pay a waitress in a maid cafe $20 for a cup of coffee to call you. To be honest, I don't think my husband really gets how the phrase is properly used, despite his insistence. He kept trying to convince me, reminding me that he is Japanese and knows what is proper. Despite the fact that I speak better Japanese than him, but I was having none of it. I just shut down and tuned him out. We got there, and sometime into the night I called his name to ask if he wanted a drink. Despite him being in hearing range, he ignored me. I said it again, and this time he looked at me, gave me this pleading shrug, and then turned back to the TV. I didn't get him a drink and just got myself one. A while later, I said his name again, and he audibly sighed. He told me that he wanted me to call him what I call him at home. To which I responded I would most certainly not be calling him what I call him at home. This was all in front of his parents, by the way. On the car drive home, I told him that I wasn't going to call him Goshijin-sama anymore because he can't draw the line between fun, playful couple stuff and his parents. He has sulked for the past week and I don't even know what to do. Normally I would not even consider the possibility that I was wrong here, but he's normally a very rational, reasonable, and respectful person. I feel like I'm being gaslighted and don't know what to do. My boyfriend of almost 3 years told me a series of white lies that to me seem more serious. Can't tell if I'm overreacting or if this is actually indicative of a bigger problem. My boyfriend and I have been dating for almost 3 years, living together for 2. We have a pretty good relationship, obviously with ups and downs, but we make it work and are happy. A little background on me and my boyfriend. I come from a single-parent home. My father was absent. My mother was and is by no means perfect, but she did her best with what she had. We were poor. Life was never easy for us, but we had each other. Since I was pretty young, I've wanted to pay her back someday. I've worked incredibly hard to be able to do so. I help her financially as much as I can and regularly pay her bills / send her cash. I'm also her only living child now, as my brother passed away 5 years ago, which basically left me to help her. I don't care, I love my mother, and the right thing to do is to help her when she needs it. But is stressful. This is relevant because my boyfriend described coming from a somewhat similar past, and it is something we have bonded over. Having the mutual experiences seemed to bring us closer. He told me he also helped his parents financially, and we would often vent to each other about the stress it brings. I am not one to confide in many people, so having someone who I felt like actually understood me was meaningful to me. So here is where the lies come in, and I need someone to either tell me I'm not crazy and this is horror, or that I am crazy and this isn't a huge deal. I'm fine with either. When we met, my boyfriend lived in a condo in a pretty swanky part of the city. I live in the US Northeast. He told me he owned that apartment / condo. I found this to be interesting / odd because he was 28 at the time, and I know this property is upwards of $650,000 on the low end, and he was in an entry-level job for only like 2 years, so the numbers just didn't really add up. Whatever, maybe he's good at saving. But then, since living together, I never once saw a piece of mail for a mortgage payment, electric bill, taxes, nothing. Not for 2 whole years. Very odd. Also, when we started living together, he didn't have his room rented out in the former apartment yet, so he was still responsible for that portion of the rent. He would send a Venmo payment to his mother on the 1st of every month for his portion. I don't own property, but I can't think of a scenario where I would Venmo my mother to pay the mortgage on a property I supposedly own. Getting more odd. He would then go to his parents' house for an afternoon and come back really upset. Usually when I would ask why, it was because they were having financial problems and he needed to help them out. I totally understood this and supported him. He literally has cried on my shoulder about this many times. He tried to start a company years back and ended up getting into debt somehow. He told me this debt was $17,000 and that he paid it off. I'm confused because I met him only 2 to 3 years after the supposed debt accrued / company dissolved, and it was already paid off. He told me when he moved back home after the business failed, he was $17,000 in debt and living at his parents' house working at a minimum wage job. How someone with a minimum wage job pays off that much debt in 3 years, I'll never know. We got into a fight a few weeks ago and I finally had enough and confronted him about these things. He doesn't help his parents, they actually pay his phone bill, and this was all a lie. He doesn't own that apartment, he didn't pay off that debt from his company. He initially told me his parents helped pay it off and then like 3 minutes later, came clean. And said that his business partner paid it off, so I have literally no idea what the truth is there, and if anything, in my eyes. His parents are the ones who are financially supporting him. So now, I'm dating a 31-year-old man who doesn't pay his own phone bill, was lying to me and / or completely fabricating aspects of his life for 3 years. And then when confronted about it, continued to make up lies and then came clean about them 5 minutes later. I'm obviously concerned that he could lie for this long, about fundamentally important things like our values, and so on. I sincerely thought I would marry this man. He seemed to understand me like no one else and to be a truly caring and genuine person. Now I'm having a hard time rationalizing actually planning a life around someone who would not only lie about their background and family etc. but also financial aspects. Aside from that, I now can't tell what is the truth and what is a lie. I've also noticed other things he has lied about, called him out on it, and he has denied it outright to my face. I see this as a form of gaslighting, as I know I'm not wrong, but he is trying to convince me otherwise. Am I overreacting? Is this a white lie that went haywire? Or is this actually a series of complete and utter bullshit used to manipulate me? And also, is it insane for me to actually consider a life with this man? My daughter received a bike from her uncle, my brother, on her 11th birthday. She was over the moon and excited to use it because it was on her wish list for so long. Days ago, I discovered that my husband reached out to my brother to ask for the recipient for the bike and returned it to the store, and kept the money for himself while my daughter was at school. The bike was at home. My daughter and I got home and she started crying after noticing the bike was gone. My husband was home at the time. He told me he returned the bike and got money in return to spend on something useful for us, since the bike was just there as a distraction and there was no need for it now since we're the dead of winter. I was aggravated and lost it on him, saying it wasn't his, didn't come from him. And he didn't pay for it, so he had no right to touch it, knowing our daughter's been wanting it for a long time, and my brother was decent enough to buy it for her despite barely having money to get him by. I told him what he did was theft and insisted he hand over the money to me so I could repurchase it, but he said he spent it on stuff for the house and doesn't have any money left now. But I knew about the money he was stashing away in the bedroom that he forbade me from tossing, and I took some of it and went out to repurchase the bike while he was out the next day. He found out and verbally lashed out at me, saying I should have never touched the money he was saving for himself, which isn't much, but I lashed right back that I had to so I could repurchase the bike he took from under our daughter. He explained that he didn't keep the money for himself and instead spent it for necessities for our home, but he was at fault for taking the bike in the first place and he was responsible for getting it back. He yelled at me for almost 10 minutes, then stormed outside and started smoking. My daughter asked why her dad was upset and that she no longer wants the bike if dad doesn't want her to have it. But I assured her that's not the case and told her she shouldn't feel guilty and to just focus on enjoying her bike. My husband hasn't stopped grilling me about how I disrespected and undermined him, and managed to make our daughter hate him after making him look like the bad guy. I again said he shouldn't have touched the bike. End of the story. He's called me thief and juvenile for taking money from his savings and being sneaky about it.